Hi, my name is Michael Piccioni, and today we will be discussing CA IDMS installation and maintenance. Installing and configuring a CA IDMS 19.0 CV can seem like a long and complicated process. This session discusses details and best practices for base, upgrade, and add-on configurations using CAISAG, CSM, and zOSMF. SMPE environment creation, configuration variables, post-install steps, and 19.0 install changes are also covered. So this is everything we'll be discussing. There's the ESD method, which we will cover the product install, a base install configuration, an upgrade install, and an add-on install configuration. For CSM, we will discuss the product installation, deployment, and a base upgrade and add-on install as well. And for zOSMF, we will discuss a base install, and then we will cover some best practices. So there is a new PAX file that went GA in March 2020. It contains all PTFs up to and including CARS 1912. It's much easier to upgrade with this PAX file since fewer PTFs need to be applied. You can download the file from Broadcom support page and then upload it to a USS directory on the mainframe. The directory should be about 3.5 times the size of the PAX file. For this new PAX file, that's about 750 megabytes. All right, so first we'll cover the ESD installation. So first you want to run the JCL to extract the product PAX file into a directory. The JCL is found in the install documentation, and here is a sample of that JCL. So in the directory with the extracted PAX, you want to edit the member unzip JCL. This JCL member will create a dataset containing several jobs to install the IDMS SMPE environment. You want to edit the new name and volume parameters for the new dataset. Once the new dataset is created, you want to edit the member AGJSEdit. AGJSEdit is an edit macro used for customizing the installation jobs. There are a lot of variables to update, including the volume info, the CSI high-level qualifiers, zone names, and site-specific dataset names. Once this member is edited, you can copy it to a proclib or a CList. And once copied, edit each of the following jobs and run AGJSEdit. You can also edit the rex exec member called AGJEDALL to update all of the jobs at once. There are 9 jobs that need to be submitted in order. The first job to run is AGJ10CSI that creates the SMPE environment. The next job, AGJ20RCB, receives the base FMIDs. You want to edit this member to only include the FMIDs you want installed. The other FMIDs require extra dataset definitions in the AGJS edit member, which your site may or may not have. For example, the culprit interface for FCS requires an FCS load lib. If you try to install FCS without a valid FCS load lib, you will have errors later on the apply job. AGJ30 APB applies the software to the target zone, and AGJ40 ACB accepts the software to the distribution zone. The other jobs are listed as optional, and that's because they apply to PTFs published after the creation of the PAX file. These steps aren't necessary, but we strongly encourage users to perform these steps to be up to date with maintenance. This also saves time performing several whole data steps that would have to be run if the PTFs are applied later. So the optional steps are AGJ50 CAR, which downloads the CA recommended services assigned statements, AGJ60 RCH, which downloads and receives whole data. AGJ70 RCM receives PTFs. AGJ80 APM applies those PTFs. And then AGJ90 ACM accepts the PTFs. In the SMPE environment's CAISAG source library, there is a member called CFIG #JCL. This member creates a new dataset and populates it with 4 members needed for configuration. The default dataset name is your high-level qualifier, followed by CAISAG.config. You should edit this member for your specific site variables and then submit it. So the 4 members that are created, the first is CAISAG. That's JCL, which submits the CAISAG program. It reads in the other 3 members and generates 18 jobs that are used to configure a system. The job card, you want to include your job card here for your future configuration jobs. The setup member is in case you have any setup cards that are needed. And varb list. This contains all of the IDMS CV specific variables used for the configuration. We'll discuss various configuration options and key variables in later slides. So now we're talking about a base install. To do a base install, the first thing you want to do is change the variable CAISAG-Upgrade to no. By default, this is set to yes, which indicates that you're upgrading a system. So set that to no. And then you want to select all of the products that you want to install. This is the first section in the varb list member. If you don't want to install a certain product now, you can always add it on later by performing an add-on install. So now we'll go over some of the key variables that are used when doing a base install. The first variable is WIG-SI-SVC, and that can be set to yes or no. You only want it to be set to yes if you're installing Task Analyzer or Log Analyzer. Setting this to yes would modify the IDMS SVC to copy job accounting data into the ERE. If you specify no, but you have installed Task Analyzer or Log Analyzer, their reports will not contain valid billing data. The SMP PFX variable should be set to the high-level qualifier of the SMPE environment that was created from your ESD. The CFG PFX configuration prefix variable, that is the prefix for your customized libraries. So there are 4 custom libraries that are created during the configuration. You have a custom JCL lib, link lib, load lib, and source lib. This member is also going to be the this variable is also going to be the high-level qualifier for your APF lib, an enforcer load lib, a 10.2 batch interface load lib, and any backups if you're choosing to take backups. Next variable is the database prefix. That's the prefix for all dictionaries, database files, and the DBA load lib. And the GJ, SAG, DSN variable, that's the name of your current library. The begin mem by default is set to job. This is the prefix for configuration job members that will be generated by CAISAG. So for example, if you were configuring a base install, you could set that begin mem to base. If you're doing upgrade, you could set it to upgrade, or you could name it by the CV. This just allows you to have multiple different jobs generated and organize them by name at once. So AutoFast support, this allows you to automatically submit the configuration jobs. So earlier I said there are 18 jobs that are configured, that are created and used to configure the CV. By default, you have to submit each job one after another manually. Using AutoFast allows the job to get submitted automatically when the previous job has finished successfully, and it does that through condition code checking. So AutoFast can be set to either yes or no, and the user ID field is only used if AutoFast is yes, and that is the user ID to notify when a job completes successfully or if it fails. Next is the GJ SVC number, and that's your SVC number. Next, the GJ CV key, that's the primary protect key. There's no default specified in the varb list, and if you do not specify a value, CAISAG will generate an error. The GJ CVNum is the central version number, and by default that's set to 190. GJ DCSys is your sysgen system number, and again by default that is set to 190. Emp demo, that controls if the employee demo database is installed or not. The default is yes. That's only used for a base install, and you cannot add the employee demo database on later. It can be added on through some manual manipulation of the install, but there's no support for that. The store prot variable can be set to yes or no. That determines if storage protect is used for programs. If storage protect is turned on, we're going to load programs out of members that begin with DLOD. And if storage protect is turned off, we load members out of the DNOD. And the default for store prot is yes. GJ VTAM ID, that's the Apple ID for the VTAM line that is defined during the base install. The line that's defined is called VTAM01, and it comes with two P-term L-term pairs. GJWS demo determines if the IDMS web services demo should be installed. This consists of some ads programs and record definitions that require TCP/IP and ads on the system. The default is no. So if you don't have ads installed, but you try to install the web services demo, CAISAG will generate an error telling you that ads must be installed. GJPMComp is the company name that appears on perfmon reports, and this variable is only important if you're installing perfmon. And then GJB102, that will create a 10.2 batch interface load lib. The default is yes. So SQL, in my opinion, is the most confusing part of the install. The base, the add-on, the upgrade, it's consistently caused me confusion. So in an attempt to entice everyone to install SQL, we created some extra SQL variables to allow you to install SQL during an upgrade. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but so in addition to saying yes to the SQL product, you must also set the variable sysSQL to yes. This will add an SQL catalog to the AppleDict dictionary, and the default for this variable is no. If you set the SQL product variable to yes, but leave sysSQL as no, the CAISAG job will produce an error. And SQL demo determines if the SQL version of the employee demo database should be installed. And again, SQL must be yes as well, the SQL product. GJ Cobrel, this is for your COBOL release, and it indicates if you're running with COBOL version 5.1 or newer. The COBOL libraries are all specified in the varb list member as well. The default for this is no. If you are using 5.1 or higher and you don't change this variable, you'll get an error during jobs 14 and 15. these jobs compile COBOL programs that are used for the employee demo databases. The JCL for these jobs changed when using COBOL 5.1 because the programs must be stored in a PDSE library. So saying yes to this will create that PDSE library and store the programs in it. WIT-DM new, that creates a new tools dictionary for all the tools products. So if you are sharing tools, you don't need sharing a tools dictionary with another existing CV. You don't need to create a new tools dictionary, but in my experience, most people would create a new tools dictionary if they're installing a fresh system. So these next three variables are just for backups. So the first one specifies that you want to do a backup of the sysdural segment. The second one does a backup of the sysgen system 99. And the third one does a backup of the database files. So you can use these backups, backup options. They do work. They're a good option to use, but I prefer to just take a backup myself of the CV. So after I install it, I would just run my own backup utility to back up the datasets. And the "and many more" line is to indicate that this is just a very small subset of the variables. I believe there's something like 800 or over 800 variables that can be configured. The ones that I discussed are the most, in my opinion, the most important ones, and they are mostly all of the ones that would cause an actual error that would prevent you from completing a base install. So now we will talk about the upgrade install. So in this case, you want to set the GJ upgrade variable to yes, and then you want to select all products that are currently configured on the system. So in this example, I'm upgrading a system, I believe, from 18.5 to 19.0, and all of these products were already installed on 18.5. And variable GJ DBO DSN, that's the name of your current 18.5 DBA load lab. The from rel variable is the release that you are upgrading from. So we support upgrading from all releases starting at 12.0. The default from rel value is 18.5. The had ads variable specifies if ads was installed on the previous release. This is another variable that will generate an error if a value is not specified. So again, you must specify yes or no. And if you specify no, the ads was not installed, we just add some ads records to the dictionary. So these are, the next two are two more SQL variables. You got upgrade sys SQL, UPG SYSQL, and that determines if an SQL catalog is going to be added to your AppleDict dictionary during the upgrade. If you choose yes, you must also choose yes for the SQL product variable earlier in the varb list. You can also add the SQL demo database during the upgrade by saying yes to UPGQ-demo. No is the default for both of these. So just to emphasize, this is only for adding an SQL catalog or the SQL demo database while doing an upgrade. If you don't want to do that, or if you already have them configured on your old system, these variables should be no. So some more upgrade variables. AB sys dbn db name. That's the DB name containing your system definition. AB DRL dbn is the DB name containing your IDMS dural information, your sysdural dictionary. The next four variables, GJ CVNum, GJ-DC-sys, GJ-GL-DMCL, and GJ-GL-DBTB. So that's your CV number, your system number, your DMCL, and your database table. You want to make sure that these variables match the values of your existing system. And for the segment variables and the DB name variables above, you want to make sure that those match your existing system as well. Now the configuration prefix for an upgrade install, that is a prefix for your new custom datasets. So you will have new, in this case, 19.0.custom.jcllib, for example, datasets. While the database prefix is the prefix for your existing database files. So your the files that are being upgraded from, in this case, 18.5 to 19.0. Oops. And then these are just some other variables that are also used from the base install. Their meaning doesn't change. That's why I just left them in a list here. But we discussed these all earlier. And lastly, you can do an add-on configuration. For an add-on, you want to make sure the upgrade variable is set to no, and you want to select all products that are already configured and all products that are being added. And then if you go to the last section, the bottom of the varb list variable file, you'll see that there's a section for add-ons, and this is where you want to select just the products that are being added. So let me just go back a slide. You can see in the main section, all the variables are J000OP, and then in the add-on section, all the variables are add-on. So if you're trying to add on, let's say SQL, you want to set the GTJ000OP to yes, and you want to select GT0 add-on to yes as well. Okay, so here are some more SQL variables. These determine if an SQL catalog and SQL demo database are going to be added. Doing an add-on saves the existing DMCL and DB table by renaming them. DMCL save and DBTB save are what they will be renamed to. Configuration prefix is the prefix for your existing custom datasets, and the database prefix is, again, for your existing database files. These other variables we discussed are also going to be used depending on what products you're being... These other variables we discussed are also being used, and other variables may be used as well depending on what products are being added. So this is a list of the jobs that are created by CAISAG. I said that there are 18 jobs that are created. There are actually 19, and the first job is informational only. So you never have to run that job, you just have to review it. That's why usually we just say there's 18 jobs. Each job will be generated, but sometimes the job will just be a dummy IEF BR14 with some JCL comments that say no JCL is generated for this job. And that's because some of these jobs are specific to some of the products. So for example, if you are installing, doing a base install with no SQL catalogs, I believe it's job 15 installs that. So that job 15 would be a dummy step. So I'll go over the jobs here. Again, the first job is job 0 is just informational messages, and that depends on what your configuration options are. Job 1 allocates the configuration libraries, and those are the custom libraries we mentioned earlier, and your APF lib, your DBA load lib, and your PDSE lib if you're using COBOL 5 or newer. Job 2 creates customized source and link members. And then job 3 assembles and links those custom modules. Job 4 is a job that does not get run automatically, even if you say auto fast is yes. So job 4 loads, uses Kyrem to load the SVC into the LPAR. And the reason that's not run automatically is that all CVs using the SVC must be down. So that's a step that requires more user knowledge and interaction than the others. So that one is always a manual step. And it does not have to be run in order. You could run this job for before the configuration, after the configuration. It doesn't really matter. You just have to be aware of what you're doing when you do it. Job 5, for a base install, it will allocate database files. If you're doing an upgrade install, it copies the DMCL and DB table load modules to your new DBA library. Job 6 just creates some members in the CAISAG library that group together some DD statements that get used later on in other jobs. Job 7, for a base install, it creates the DMCL and DB table, and then it formats and populates dictionaries as well. For an upgrade, it populates dictionaries with definitions, messages, and protocols. Job 8, for a base install, it will update the DMCL and DB table with segments. For an add-on, it updates sysgen, DMCL, and DB table with selected products. Job 9, as a base, it populates the sysdural dictionary. It populates the sysdural dictionary and also creates and updates system 99 in sysgen. And for an upgrade, it just updates the sysdural dictionary. Job 10, as a base, formats and populates appledict. For an upgrade, it just updates the appledict. Job 11 base formats and loads the ASF dictionary. An upgrade updates the ASF dictionary. Job 12, as a base, it will format the tools files. 13, as a base, it creates the tools dictionary and databases and updates sysgen. If you're doing an upgrade or an add-on, it will update the tools dictionary and sysgen. 14, for a base and add-on, creates the network version of the empdemo database. Job 15, for a base and add-on, it will build the SQL demo database and the web services demo. 16, for a base and add-on, it adds configuration tasks for EndeavorDB. 17, as a base, it will update the sysgen. It creates system 99 and configures your system number. It also formats journals. For an upgrade and an add-on, it copies programs and tasks from system 99 to system 90. And job 18 performs final backups of all database files if the backup options were chosen. So after configuring a system, there are some post-configuration steps. It's important to read the install documentation and the release notes to see what configuration steps there are. So these are just some of the post-configuration steps. So if this is primarily for a base install, updating the program properties table to indicate the system key that RHDC OMVS should run in. You want to configure your VTAM, TCP/IP, and TSO access. If you did an upgrade install, you want to copy any tasks and programs from sysgen system 99 to your specified DC system. The upgrade jobs do not do that, so that's something you have to do afterwards. Again, if this was an upgrade, you want to configure any additional dictionaries. So one way you can do this is you can edit job 10 to reference your extra dictionaries instead of referencing the AppleDict dictionary, which they currently do. And here are some specific uh, instructions for upgrading from 18.5 to 19.0. You want to update each SQL catalog with the input in member view 19.0u, which is in the CAISAG source SMPE library. If you're using Visual DBA and SQL, you want to run the convert catalog command against your SQL catalogs. And views that use select star from system.schema need to be dropped and recreated. And finally, you want to run tests, especially if you did an upgrade or even an add-on. You want to run any baseline tests just to make sure there were no errors caused. So these are some highlights of the changes that were made to the configuration process for release 19.0. When you're upgrading from 18.5 to 19.0, jobs 7, 9, 10, and 13 will only add new or changed modules and messages to the dictionary. Previously, we would re-add everything to the dictionary, and we still do add everything to the dictionary if you're upgrading from a release prior to 18.5. We do this new processing during the configuration by reading a member called IDDX I5J0, which is a list of all of the changed items. Periodically, PTFs are made to update this member, so you want to check the support site before upgrading to make sure you have the latest version. And this is implemented under CAISAG, CSM, and zOSMF. The next item is actually incorrect. We removed Web Connect references from 19.0. With the SKU consolidation, SQL is now included, so there's no need for the Web Connect option anymore. So if you want SQL, just select it. And if you previously had web services configured, you want to choose the SQL product for the upgrade install. And that PTF SO12262 is currently the latest installation PTF. Okay, the next section covers installing with CSM. This is at a higher level than the previous section because they use mostly the same process, the same variables. Also, CSM is being deprecated in favor of zOSMF. So once that's completed, CSM won't be used anymore, but I think it's important to still go over it at a high level. So for the product install, you want to go to the products tab and you should see IDMS DB-MVS on the left hand side. You should see 19.0 and then you'll see the 0000. That's the, I guess, the PAX release. If you're using the new PAX file, you'll actually see 19.12 here. So you want to click on that release, and then you want to find the base install in this list. So if you look under type, you'll see base install. Look at the one towards the bottom. It's IDMS DB version 19.0 product package. So that's the one that we're using. So then once you select that, you can do a full installation or a custom installation. A full installation selects all of the IDMS FMIDs to be installed. Custom installation lets you choose the ones that you want. So that's usually the one to use. Next, you can configure your SMPE environment. So you can define your SMPE high-level qualifier. You want to set the DSN type to PDS or library, and then provide a volume and unit type. So if you selected any FMIDs to be installed besides the main FMID, you will see this screen to provide the load libs for these products. And then you'll be brought to this screen at the end, which is a summary of everything you've chosen. So just click the install button. Once this is finished, you'll have a brand new SMPE environment. Deployment. This is just a copy of the SMPE target libraries. So you click on the Deployments tab, and then this lovely red arrow points to the Create Deployment link. So you want to click on that. You want to follow the wizard for creating a deployment. It's fairly straightforward. You select the new SMPE environment. You select the products that you're deploying, which in this case is just IDMS. And then you want to create a new methodology if you don't already have one. This just defines the naming convention for deployed datasets. The next step in the wizard would let you select the system that you're, or the LPAR that you're deploying to, and then you deploy. Once your deployment is created, you want to go to the Deployment tab of CSM, and your new deployment should show up under the Configurable dropdown. You can see this on the left, the Configurable option. You want to find your deployment, select it, and then on the Actions button, you want to choose Create Configuration. So if you're doing an upgrade, or if you have a previous IDMS configuration that is similar, you can import the configuration values from it. In this case, we're going to go ahead and skip the import. So the next few screens are just like the VARB list. This screen lists all of the IDMS products that can be configured. This is also where you specify if you're performing an upgrade, and there are 4 options that are unique to CSM. Those 4 options are update CSM configuration, which is basically the same as an add-on install. Use DMCL file definitions. This uses the file definitions from the DMCL, so it doesn't require any files from the VARB list variables. There's configure dictionary, which configures an individual IDMS dictionary. So this can be used if you had extra dictionaries that needed to be upgraded. And then there's CV already configured. So that's when a CV that has already been updated is being used to configure individual IDMS dictionaries. So the next screen is select the IDMS system. So this gets defined under the CSM subsystems tab. That had to have been done separately from this configuration. If it's not already defined, you can use the Create Occurrence button. Then this page goes through all of the variables that can be customized. Variables that have that yellow triangle with the exclamation mark symbol, they require confirmation from their values. And you can use the Find Unresolved Variable buttons on the bottom left to navigate to the next required variable. Most users will probably want to read through each variable, but if you're experienced or if this is just a test CV that you don't care too much about, that makes it a lot faster, so you can just confirm the required variables and move on to the next step. So once the configuration is built, you can validate and implement it. Validation makes sure that there are no issues with dataset allocations and naming. It cannot check for invalid configuration errors, such as an incorrect DB name. The screen on this slide is the implementation screen. Each job can be released individually, or you can release them all at once. If there are any errors, the implementation will fail. And you can look at the output to determine the cause, and then you want to make appropriate changes within or outside of CSM and continue implementation from the last successful job. If you're making changes outside of CSM, you can also skip the step. Okay, and lastly, this section discusses installing IDMS using zOSMF. zOSMF is very similar to CSM. The IDMS team is actively developing the IDMS install through zOSMF, so some minor details of this presentation may change. When you first log into zOSMF, you'll be brought to a page with a bunch of icons to choose from. For now, we only care about the workflows icon. And then this screenshot is the workflow section. You can see all the existing workflows. To create a new workflow, select the Actions button from the drop-down menu, and then select Create Workflow. Once you do that, you'll get this pop-up window. Here you'll provide the location of the workflow definition file. This is an XML file provided by IDMS, which controls the flow of the configuration. There should be 3 different workflow files, one for a base configuration, one for an upgrade, and one for an add-on. In this presentation, we're only going to cover the base configuration. The variable input file is an optional file containing a list of variables used within the configuration and their desired values. Currently, there is no variable input file for IDMS. So on this screen, you can name the workflow instance, assign an owner, and designate what system the workflow steps will be performed on. By default, the owner user ID is the ID of the person that created the workflow. If you will also be the one performing the workflow steps, then check the Assign All Steps to Owner User ID box. Once your workflow is created, the next screen you'll see shows all of the steps that can be performed to configure your system. Currently, there are 44 steps, but depending on your configuration, you may not be performing all of them. Steps that should not be run will have a state of skipped. In this screenshot, you can see the first step is in, you can see the first step is in the ready state, and you should only ever perform steps that are in a ready state. To perform a step, click on the step's title, in this case, the Select Products to Configure. Once you've clicked on a step name, you'll be brought to the Details tab. This elaborates on what is being done in the step. After you've read the details, go to the Perform tab, which is what this screenshot shows. Again, this is the Select Products to Configure step. This screen lists all the products that you can install. Some products have their own subset of variables and configuration options. Selecting Yes to a product here will change any future configuration steps for that product to the ready state. Going forward in this presentation, we're only going to configure these 4 options. So IDMS DB, DC, UCF, and SQL. So at this point, the next available step is the Define Global Variable step. The main purpose of this is to define variable values that are used as part of other variables in later steps. For example, the configuration prefix and database prefix variables are used as the high-level qualifiers for many datasets that will be defined in future steps. Variables are divided into groups as shown on the left. You cannot move on to the next group of variables until every mandatory variable has a valid value. Mandatory variables have the red asterisk in front of the variable name. Once all variables in the groups are defined, the Finish button becomes available, and you can use that to complete the step. So now that we've selected the products to configure and define the global variables, more steps have become available. The Validate Additional Variables step will be present for every base configuration. This step allows the user to customize individual dataset names and allocation parameters. The Define SQL Variables and Define SQL Demo Database Variable steps are available because we are installing IDMS SQL. And the Define Employee Demo Database Variable step, the Define Employee Demo Database Variables step is available because we're installing IDMS DB. Any steps in a state of skipped should not be run for this configuration because the corresponding IDMS product is not being configured. Once you have completed all of the available steps, a new step called Information about the selected configuration becomes in the ready state. This step and the remaining 17 steps are equivalent to jobs 0 through 3 and jobs 5 through 18 in CAISAG. Job 4 is not included. Once a step is completed, the next step becomes available to perform. This is an example of performing the Allocate Configuration Library step, which is job 1 in CAISAG. You will have the option to create a job card. If you have not defined a job card to zOSMF, you will need to modify the account info and message class. You can modify the job card for each step, or you can apply the job card to all steps in the workflow. The next screen allows you to review and optionally edit the generated JCL before submitting the step. There should be no need to make any JCL changes for any type of configuration. After submitting the JCL, you'll be on the Status tab, which will show you the output of the JCL. If the job was successful, the step will be marked as completed, and the next step becomes available to run. Once all steps have been run, the CV is installed. So here's just some best practices when installing or updating a CV. Firstly, you want to back up all dictionaries and load libs before upgrading. If there is a need to back off the upgrade, or if anything else goes wrong, you can easily restore the system. Also, apply all PTFs to the SMPE environment before upgrading. This makes sure you're up to date with maintenance and will cut down on the amount of whole data that needs to be run. And that's done through the IDDX I5J0 list that we talked about earlier. So if a PTF modifies or adds a new message, for example, instead of having to run the whole data, that message will be included as part of the upgrade install. Another important thing is saving your configuration libraries. This will save a lot of time during the next upgrade process. For CSM, you can even import the values from the previous configuration. And assuming you saved the configuration values, especially the varbless member, when you're doing an upgrade, it's smart to look at those values instead of having to remember or try to figure it out by going through different displays and commands in the CV. The next bullet point is use CSM to manage SMPE environment. This is very much a subjective recommendation, but this is my preference. I think it's very easy to use and see what maintenance is applied. I just think it's more convenient and faster, but that's up to each individual person if they like that or not. And finally, don't use AutoFast. It's a nice feature, but I think it offers minimal advantage over submitting the jobs manually. Um, and if you're performing an upgrade or an add-on, I definitely would not use it. It generates condition code checking at the end of each step, and that kind of makes restarting failed jobs more difficult, especially if you have to do any kind of customization or modify dictionaries. If you're going to use AutoFast, I would only use it for base installs. So, in conclusion, installing and upgrading is necessary to stay current with maintenance and new features. Uh, Hopefully, after this presentation, you'll agree that it's not as difficult as it looks. These are really just, batch jobs, updating some dictionaries and sysgen. It's really not as complicated as it might seem. zOSMF and CSM also have several advantages. It's got a GUI display. It's easier to save your configuration files. Um, it's a bit faster depending on what you're doing. Um, so there are good reasons to use them. And finally, save your configuration options. That will save a lot of hassle for yourself or the next person that has to upgrade an IDMS system. And that's it. Thank you.